Elden Ring Shadow of the Erdtree is one of the most controversial releases FromSoftware has ever made. Many believe that it wasn't worth the wait or see it as the unfair difficulty spike they've been dreading for years, but why is the narrative so divisive on the subject? Let's dive deep into the lands of Shadow and discuss just how I see the DLC as not only a big step forward to FromSoftware, but crucial to understanding the beauty of Elden Ring, and why you may need to give it one more chance. Your journey begins right where it's been speculated upon since Elden Ring's release, in the Mohgwyn Palace. The Mohgwyn Palace is quite the obscure area for casual players. It fits right in line with my previous video on the topic, being one of the great many secrets Miyazaki leaves up for you to find, whether in completing Vare's quite in-depth questline, or finding your way to a sneaky teleporter far in the outskirts of the consecrated snowfields. It's an area dripping, quite literally at times, with horror, gore, and the unimaginable. Blood for the Blood God, the Lord of Blood himself, Mohg. Mohg is one of Elden Ring's premier challenges, and stands between you and the Lands of Shadow. He's one of the two main adversaries you must defeat in order to gain access to the new area, the other being Star Scourge Radahn. Most players will find and defeat Radahn on their first playthrough, as he's a mid-game challenge, presented and hinted towards quite obviously by many NPCs, and splattered all over the game's marketing material. Mohg being at the gateway to the DLC should be the first indicator that it may not be all of what it seems. He's a challenge, a very difficult boss, only barely trailing behind Malenia at the top of the food chain in the lands between. After finally managing to slay the beast, with the help of your wondrous physic to prevent a complete fight reset at phase transition, you rest at your new site of grace to level your character, and you see her, Leda, the Needle Knight. Leda is a new character, introduced just a little while before the DLC's release and the marketing material. We're able to meet her for the first time now. She explains the mission her and her fellow band of warriors are on, to follow the steps of Miquella and uncover the secrets down below. The story shrinks in scale. You only have one question to push you forward. Where is Miquella? And just what is he doing there? You touch the cocoon and are transported into your next adventure. Leaving the empty cave, you're met with a vista completely juxtaposed by that of the first steps into Limgrave you made dozens of hours ago. The colors are all opposing those you've grown used to. The golden Erdtree of old is replaced with an almost Vanta black, leaking and decaying shadow tree. The green fields you know from Limgrave are gone, and the gravesite plain is exclusively dark brown fields of wheat and tombstones. Death is your first thought. You can almost smell it in the air. Nothing looks promising, nothing looks inviting. You're almost scared to press on. A colossal beast, the only resemblance being a wicker man of old, stomps upon the dead fields. Castles and strongholds line the cliffsides for an eternity. You could almost feel a new sense of verticality. The atmosphere is crushing. It's the complete converse of what you felt before. Entering Limgrave, though daunting, was exciting. The many questions that boggle your mind left you ripe for a new journey. Now, you're humbled again. No matter how high of a level you may be, your instincts remind you that this isn't the Lands Between, and you must tread lightly if you want to make it out alive. This first moment is what stuck out the most to me. I remember truly being overwhelmed by the daunting scene laid out before me. The baldachin above, almost acting as the steel bars of your shadowy cell that you just willingly stepped into. It's FromSoft's tried and true subversion once again. Previously on top of the world, as the Elden Lord, the conqueror of the Lands Between. Now, a shadow of your former self in a new world. Shadow of the Erdtree thrives in its new sense of wonder, but also its new feeling of claustrophobia. It plays with new emotions you may have not felt in the base game. Every area in the Lands Between is quite vast, with large swaths of land to ride around on torrent. Each landmark is clearly taller than the rest to guide you towards it. This new area is much, much more vertical, and the places you think you may be able to just ride to are completely cut off. You have to truly explore in order to actually get anywhere. This is the first stark difference and new experience this expansion has to offer, and that alone sets it in a league of its own. They redefined how you even interface with their world. At your first sight of grace on the path forward, you find two crucial things to help you understand the meaning of this expansion: a cross of Mikola and your first shadow tree fragment. The crosses of Mikola are there to guide you through the world. They mark the locations where Mikola shed his corporeal form and soul, each one with a different and unique aspect of the young Empyrean. Just why is he doing this? What is he trying to achieve? That question is what will be in your mind at every checkpoint throughout your adventure. Second, you have the Shadow Tree fragments, the real star of the show from a gameplay perspective. This is where the controversy begins and where I have my own strong feelings. I believe that the Shadow Tree fragments are a nigh essential aspect of the overall themes of this DLC. The fragments take your health and damage output and multiply it by a set amount each time, letting it exponentially scale along with the new enemies. This is such a crucial cross in the road. Purists scold it for being an unnecessary change to the bog standard level system, where those more open to change, such as myself, see it as FromSoft innovating to be able to try out some new enemy and damage scaling. The new system allows you to ignore it altogether for a resoundingly difficult challenge. You could collect some here and there and make it have some higher stakes, or you could collect every single last one and go for their intended, though obviously, easier progression. The Shadow Tree fragments finally address a problem the mainstream news outlets and particularly vocal Redditors have been claiming. They finally added a proto-difficulty slider to their game. This is the biggest change and possible sign to the future for FromSoftware, and though controversial, I believe it is part of a larger puzzle, making Shadow of the Erdtree a unique entry in its own right. It gives you a valuable reward for exploration, and it helps make your path forward even more clear. The Mikolan crosses and presence of the tree fragments pinpoint particular story beats. As you defeat new challenges, you get stronger. You grow alongside the bosses, and it all leads to one final conclusion. You could start the DLC in many different directions, but without exploring too deeply, since you already aren't used to this new system of verticality, your first destination is all but certainly going to be Belorat Tower Settlement. Belorat is the pseudo-Stormvale castle of this expansion, your first real legacy dungeon to introduce you to new enemies and set the tone on boss design. It eases you in with a false sense of security, familiar yet so foreign. Instead of the raging storms, overcast by the light of gold from the Erdtree, now it's only dismal. The dark themes of the Lands of Shadow radiate within the city. Ghosts and corpses roam the streets, putrescent flies pick upon the rotten, and dust clouds the skies above. Everything about Belorat is rancid, but this sense of a once former glory is evident. The Lands of Shadow seem cursed, like the ruins of a world after an apocalypse. While the lands between seemed like a place trying desperately to fight against its inevitable end, the Lands of Shadow seem content with an eerie emptiness, and acceptance of whatever fate befell them. This core design of the DLC is what makes it so starkly different to the base game for me, and comes to a crescendo with your first boss, the Divine Beast Dancing Lion. The opening cinematic for the beast is there to remind you just how dead and decaying this world is. A slumbering monster, the last of its kind, to defend the city one last time, until you notice two sets of legs underneath its facade. It's no monster. It's a puppet. Two people from whatever former empire ruled this place take suit once more. The snapping of the jaw and erratic jumps make it seem to be fighting almost like a cornered animal in its enclosure. The sudden movements are on a new level, even for FromSoftware, shifting between different elemental affinities as the fight goes on. It's jumping and spinning and thrashing to a cacophony of strings and drums all around in its large arena. The fight itself isn't too much of a hurdle, but the sheer spectacle of it all really is a peak for Elden Ring, and sets the tone and precedent moving forward. You climb the tower behind the boss arena after your victory, only to realize there is no path forward yet, so you take to the gravesite plain once again and head to Castle Ensis to continue your journey. Each and every landmark is distinct in its own way, yet for your second one, you're greeted with familiarity again, but in its own twist. The trek through Ensis is quick, mages and trolls per usual for a place so reminiscent of Caria Manor. The navigation is straightforward, and there's even some solid loot along the way. I describe it so quickly because it really is a bit of a disappointment of a quote-unquote legacy dungeon. It hits you now that maybe the wait wasn't worth it. that your $40 could have been spent else. R'Lana, the Twin Moon Knight. R'Lana is peak boss design. Aside from the lack of opening cutscene and kind of boring arena, her swift, precise, Sullivan-esque movements zip by within a flash. She dual wields her blades of fire and ice, and you're now stepping in sync to her dance of wit and agility. You're playing on her terms. R'Lana is fierce. She's a tough challenge, and a much-needed breath of fresh air when the tail end of the base game is packed with large monstrous foes. A knight in shining plate armor, tall and sleek, yet similar in form and abilities to the Tarnished. Regardless of her stale arena, the fight is a spectacle, and another notch on FromSoftware's belt in the opening hours of this behemoth of an expansion. Once you finally claim your victory, the real heart and soul of this world becomes so much more evident. You are now at the crossroads, Shadow Altus, familiar in name, yet foreign in scale and aesthetic. The sky lightens up, a dark and sinister stronghold takes form ahead, and you meet with your long-lost companion once again. Leda here gives you the reins, and the entirety of the Land of Shadow is now at your disposal. The sheer desolation of the Shadow Realm almost washes away for a moment. There seems to be hints of life for once. Where Ballarat stood, almost frozen in time after some grand tragedy, and Entis seemingly insignificant on the grand stage, Shadow Altus is a bit different. Yes, there are ruins and destruction, but the military camps, marching troops, and the total occupied nature of it all makes it seem like it's the only thriving place left. The most evil and menacing fortress you've ever seen in all of Elden Ring almost looks as a mirage upon the war-torn landscape. Before, areas like Limgrave, the Altus Plateau, and to an extent Liurnia of the Lake seemed to be in an overall stagnation. It wasn't jolly and wholesome, but the landscape oozed a sense of peace at one time. Beautiful trees and cliffs, innocent wildlife scurrying about, and even the chance NPC encounter to lighten your mood. The strongholds and caves were the places you dare not go while unprepared, knowing a fight would be imminent. Shadow Altus throws that notion away almost entirely. Just existing in the Shadowlands is stressful, oppressing, and scary. The buildings and camps of soldiers, though ultimately still your enemies, give almost a twisted sense of safety in such a hostile place. It's the one place that hasn't fallen under the foot of oppression, and you come to find out shortly, it is because they are the oppressors. Messmer, the Impaler. Messmer is everything. Messmer is the reason for it all. He awaits your arrival at the very top of the Shadow Tower. The ascent up the tower really feels like a final love letter to every Dark Souls fan. I believe it was all intentional, and you could feel the hard work put into every nook and cranny. It echoes feelings of the past, whether that be Sen's Fortress, Aldia's Keep, or the Astral Clock Tower itself. It's an amalgamation of everything the fans fell in love with so many years ago. I believe it's almost a farewell to the style of Legacy Dungeon. And though the previous systems may be controversial, I think if they do take such a step away from this type of game, it will have been done nothing but justice here. Ascending the tower is a thrill, with all different types of enemies, hazards, levers revealing secret paths, secret items scattered upon the rafters, and genuinely incredibly dense and succinct level design. It all leads to the aforementioned poster boy, this entry's Malenia, and what an impression does he give. I truly believe from the bottom of my heart that Messmer the Impaler is one of FromSoftware's greatest design bosses. From his epic score to his dark and sinister opening cutscene, every attack he throws at you during your duel is perfection. Messmer signifies everything that the Shadow of the Erdtree stands for, a dark, upside-down familiarity, and letting go of the past and killing it if you have to. Messmer was the one who scorched Ballarat, the one who left the Omen people in this state of ruin, and he's the one who rules this dying land with an iron fist. But he's trapped, abandoned by his mother to rot away, cursed with a base serpent lodged within, confined to the top of his tower, waiting to die. He may be the ruler of the Shadowlands, but after his crusade many years ago, he's ruling over a heap of ash and rot. You come here to end it all, to end his suffering, and bring an end to this pitiful cycle of death. Miquella must have come here too. Messmer's his family after all, and you've been following his path this entire time. But my God, must he have taken pity upon him. he must have left him here, not helped him, and that adds even more gravity to it all. Not even Mikola, the so-called kind, could have spared Messmer from his fate. He's caught in the same cycle as those from the lands between, and in order to find Mikola, we must stop this. Steel against flesh, sword against spear, you fight to the death. Either you or him, only one of you will be leaving his throne room. Once you beat him down low enough, his inner secrets and rage spew forth in the form of his base serpent, adding ferocity and chaos to his attacks, but still in such a well-timed and beautiful manner. Everything about this fight is peak. It's perfected the formula of style, clarity, finesse, and madness. Once you finally pierce the heart and behead the beast, you kill everything Elden Ring has stood for along with him. Messmer is the crux of it all. Though he's not the most difficult fight you'll face, nor even close to the final foe to cross paths with you, he embraces everything about the design behind Elden Ring. The last vestige of a dying land, this time even more destroyed than the lands between. You've already become the Elden Lord, slayed the strongest beasts, pierced the skies to kill gods, and even gone back in time. You've done it all already, and they know this. They didn't decide to release a DLC to have you repeat the story beats all over again. It was to bookend the experience altogether, killing the past, starting a life anew. Whether intentional or not, you finally have freed the oppressed Omenkind and given them justice. On your path following Mikola, you did a good deed and laid the lands of shadow to rest. And though your journey must continue, the scourge of Marika's bloodline is almost all but wiped away now, and I think that's really special and impactful. Following the Shadow Keep, you have much more to do, and I won't go beat by beat to explain it all, but you surely have already seen and done so much already in the Lands of Shadow. There are many great sequences that fit into the overall thesis, but to avoid bloat, I'll explain them quite fast. It features many standout bosses, like the Putrescent Knight, a vestige of Saint Trina, Mikola's alter ego, down in a subterranean sea of purple, or the Shadow Tree Avatar, a warped and twisted dying flower protecting its home to the death to stop your trek to the Shadow Tree base. Every fight is one of sheer survival. This land is dying, and you need to snuff it out for good. You must advance to a new era, a new generation of FromSoftware, and kill Elden Ring yourself. The one standout fight for me before the final challenge is, of course, Baal the Dread. The fight against Baal is riveting. A dragon boss without any issues that notoriously plagued their catalog before. No camera problems, no lock-on problems, no inflated health bar if you properly level up your shadow fragments, just sheer spectacle. Some of the most badass attacks, movement, and environment that FromSoft has cooked up yet. They took everything they learned from Madeira and Placidus Axe and morphed it into a masterpiece that I'm sure nobody will ever forget. Another dragon from a bygone era, by now, surely the final one, to be put out for good by the newfound Elden Lord. There's much more I'd love to gush about the boss design, world structure, and progression, but I feel like I'd get too lost in the weeds from the main point. But one last thing that makes Shadow of the Erdtree a real springboard into the new era of FromSoftware for me are the NPCs you meet along your path. By now, NPCs are a staple for Miyazaki and the team. They're some of the most well-known and recognizable aspects of all their games at this point, and I truly think they finally nailed the personality, diversity, and simplicity of the NPC quests for the first time. Though icons like Solaire will always be at the top of everyone's list, the new characters have a certain reality to them that gives them so much life to me. It's the only FromSoft entry where I completed every NPC quest on my first go-around without any guides or previous knowledge. It all comes so naturally. They tell you their goals, they tell you how to help them out, and they reward you with knowledge and lore to help you understand this forgotten place. I know FromSoft purists much prefer the smoke and mirrors, misdirection, and obscurity of it all, and I do love my fair share of cryptic NPCs, but in such a focused and short narrative, I think the change was absolutely needed. Ansbach, Thiolier, and Leda will always be remembered for me in a way I felt and perceived the narrative of this expansion. They're all lost souls, yet also strong warriors with the convictions and ambitions to enter the Lands of Shadow to fulfill their respective destinies. You learn later as you progress that they've all been manipulated by Mikola, that his kindness is merely a veil used to hide his more sinister ambitions. Everything starts to break down at this point. Like the baldachin obscuring the Lands of Shadow from the lands between, Mikola's ruse is all-encompassing. These loyal followers are nothing more than pawns on Mikola's chessboard. When they find this out, you find out their true colors. Some feel betrayed, others still loyal to their ambitions and love for Mikola, and this constantly changing state of affairs is riveting. It keeps a changing and flowing narrative as you complete tasks and conquer your enemies, and it leads up to your final confrontation at the gates of the divinity. This final stretch of your journey is the apex of over a decade of improvement and innovation from the beloved studio. This dying world must finally be put to rest. This swan song must scream, and Elden Ring must finally come to a close in exchange for a brighter future. You meet Leda, the liaison you first met in front of that cocoon so many hours ago, and she lets you choose, but you know there's only one real decision you can make after everything you've been through. She's the only thing standing before you and the answers you've chased from the moment you entered this dark realm, so you fight. If you manage to finish every quest, you're treated with a masterclass climax to your beloved friends and foes. You join up with Ansbach and Tialier, the last loyal friends you have, to defeat Leda once and for all. Leda brings along Dane, the stubborn old monk who you knew never had any love for you, and depending on certain factors, two of either Freya, Mor, or Hornsent. These are the people you once believed to be your compatriots, those who have struggled, just like you, who not too long ago you were doing quests for. Now they've betrayed you, to protect whatever Miquella is hiding at the top of the spire. Blood stains the dusty floor, everyone finds their enemy to face, and chaos erupts. It becomes quite the slaughter, as friends turn on friends and foes settle their beefs. Only one side can emerge victorious. And after a long and arduous uphill battle, the bodies of your former friends lay lifeless at your feet. Ansbach, your most loyal supporter, awaits you ahead. Being a former follower of Moog, you finally come clean to your part in ending his dynasty, but Ansbach is already aware. He speaks in reverence and respect of both you and his Moog, and expresses his fear for what lies ahead. His honor has bound him here, and he understands he may not make it out alive. He and Tialier join you, and you enter your final confrontation. Miquella and promised consort Radahn. You finally reach the climax of your adventure. You're right in front of the gates of divinity. Miquella, this entire time, has been trying to achieve godhood. By shedding all of the corporeal aspects of himself, Miquella and his reanimation of his dear brother Radahn are here to usurp the mother, Marika herself. Miquella desecrated the corpses of Radahn and Moog to create his perfect protector, because all lords need a consort. They want to usher in a new age, to start again, with Miquella at the helm. You know of his seductions, the way Miquella tricks and manipulates all those he requires, with his false love and care. With Moog's legacy being so dishonored, and Saint Trina ordering the death of Miquella at all costs, Ansbach and Tialier have their own horses in the race. It's all a front, and he must be stopped. The Shadowlands are out of sight, and nothing but bright light and biblical glow emanates from the promised consort. The battle in the heavens has commenced. This fight is controversial, and well criticized, and I understand the hatred. I truly do. It was the hardest challenge I'd ever faced in a FromSoftware game. It almost felt unfair. Like nothing I could do could be strong enough to stop him. I was mad, frustrated, and distraught. But that's the point. Like I mentioned previously, I believe FromSoftware is looking to go in a new direction for the future. The success and grandeur of Elden Ring, the game that took the world by storm, is not the norm. The animations, the combat design, the dungeons and the bosses, all of it has remained within the realm of similarity for more than a decade. And at the end of the largest expansion, on the coattails of their largest game, you must defeat a god. You need to kill everything about Elden Ring. All the complaints that the late game was too unfair, and that the world was too empty, and that the bosses lacked substance, they heard you. You were thrusted into the darkest, most hostile setting yet, but with a new power scaling system, a new sense of verticality and exploration, and a whole new slew of bosses at the apex of their creativity and finesse. You found the ending, the literal gate into heaven, and the final mystery of Miquella's plan has been discovered. You need to kill the last of Marika's bloodline. You need to end it all, for good. Radon seems undodgeable. The beams and rays that emit with every swing are near blinding. The arena is large, but provides nowhere to go that's out of his reach. His attacks seemingly never end, and his health bar is monstrous, whether you level up your Shadow Tree fragments or not. He's the end, and when he phase transitions and Mikola rests upon his back, the chaos increases tenfold. They want you to struggle, to die, to finally, actually get good. No matter if you use your summons, have help from a friend, or aid from your companions Ansbach and Tialier, it's a ridiculous challenge for all players. A score, matched to the elegant yet ferocious attacks coming your way, paint the perfect picture of a battle at the end of time, and it's a glorious sight to behold. Eventually, though, you will, no matter how long it takes, come out with a victory, and a victory sweeter than any you've ever tasted before. And only bliss will take over your mind, body, and soul. The end of Elden Ring is here, and you've persevered through it all. They poured their heart and soul into a project and its expansion that most studios couldn't dream of producing. But you could tell it was enough. The level of content, detail, and art direction put into Elden Ring and its DLC is immense. By the end, you could almost feel the weight lifting off their shoulders as it falls off yours. Every indication points to a new dawn, a new era for Miyazaki and FromSoftware, a time to experiment. They had their big break, they outsold any metric they could have ever imagined, and they took over the world of RPGs. All of the new and fantastic additions and improvements they made in the DLC feel like a testing ground, like a time to feel the players out, and to help guide them in the new direction they want to take. The announcement of Night Rain only shows this further. Not directed by Miyazaki, not premium priced, and multiplayer focused. They're ready to break out of their shell. Shadow of the Erdtree is not only a marvelous achievement on all levels, but almost stands as a game in itself. It blew my expectations away, and almost had me more surprised and starstruck than the base game ever did. No matter the arguments and criticisms over the many new aspects they introduced here, I believe it will bode well for FromSoftware's future, and one day, all players will understand and appreciate the strides that Shadow of the Erdtree made for the genre as a whole. It only took having to kill a god at the gates of divinity. Thank you.